hopefully that's working. Yeah, they're getting ridiculous even here. And we're still on the low end compared to a lot of places. It's like I filled up the day before yesterday because I was coming home from work, and it's $4 here, which is unheard of. The rate at which it jumped is alarming. Like it's been going up for over, a year now. It's been going up, and people have been noticing, but it hasn't been fast enough, I think, to alarm a lot of people. And then it's been exponentially jumping, which yeah, it makes sense, but
Here we go. So $4 a gallon, like I said, was kind of not normal, but still like not unheard of, right? You know, we had seen those sorts of prices before,
right.
and it wasn't like the most insane thing in the world, but it was still like really inconvenient, really fucking stupid. But now, like a week ago, like I posted on Tumblr that we had like 609, right? And that was a gas station that was 540 like a week and a half before that.
Jesus.
So this was a Chevron, right? And like, we were even getting, so Arcos around here are considered like sort of the lower tier and stuff, and we're seeing like 555 at Arco stations. And
Thanks.
and I'm a bit south of LA County, and that's where the prices are at. And I've seen stuff in LA County of course going above $7 an hour, like pushing up to $8 an hour, or $8 a gallon, sorry. And that's just, I mean, like they even, we even saw the meme about, what was it, I Am Legend, right, with the apocalypse and everything, and like gas prices were around $7.05 or something like that. I forget exactly what, but
it was up. Yeah, it is kind of weird to see a movie that's supposed to be based in, like, obviously those are the prices that
the fall of civilization, you know.
Yeah, that's where it was going before the entire like country collapsed, more or less. It's a little yeah, it's a little on the nose.
So with that in mind, then we get to, of course, what the media says about how we should feel about that, right? And so we have guys like Stephen Colbert. Can you hear this dude right now?
I'll tell you what, I will never complain about a destination wedding again. Russia has been hit with a series of crippling sanctions, and it looks like there's more to come because the U.S. and its European allies are now discussing banning imports of Russian oil. Take that, Putin. We're not going to buy our gas from a war criminal. We're going to buy it from the good guys, Saudi Arabia.
I mean, he's got a point there, which is a little funny.
Well, what this is the thing is that he can like sort of like, smile, cry at the irony of the morality of this whole thing, but he's still on the side of sanctioning Putin.
Like, yeah, he somehow still manages to walk it back to like it shouldn't be a big deal because you should just it's the same thing with old Pete saying that if you can't pay for gas, then you ought to just get an electric car, buy a $60,000 electric car.
Oh yeah, well that's what's.
But it's going to cost.
Coming up next.
Since the invasion, oil prices have skyrocketed. Today, the average gas price in America hit an all-time record high of over $4 per gallon. Okay, that stings, but a clean conscience is worth $1 or $2.
Yeah, so a clean conscience, right? That's something that we can be secure in knowing that we did the right thing, except for the Saudi Arabia part.
Yeah, except for the Saudi Arabia part. I feel like Colbert is kind of a good example of this like comedy news. It kind of they kind of do this thing where they make a joke and then they get serious and they make a joke and they get serious, and it's like they kind of soften you up a little bit for the actual stupid shit that they say.
Yeah. No, and but the thing is, it's not designed to make you think, which was what a lot of good comedy was about, right? That's what comedians are supposed to be good at, is sort of pointing out the underlying like assumptions, the underlying implications about the everyday things that we do, the everyday things that we take for granted, and then pointing out how some things are just funny. They don't make sense, or they maybe are backwards from how we think that it works. Like, comedy is supposed to be about revealing some things to people that resonate with them in their lives, but also speak to them, right, on a level of identifying with experience. And all this is just preaching.
I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of yeah, like historically, you're thinking about like comedy and stuff. I mean, if you're talking about somebody who's more satirical and stuff, even a lot of it was used to criticize, um, governments and system. I mean, that was the point.
Yeah, and
You say, "Oh,
honestly, it goes back like ages. Like, do you ever remember Gulliver's Travels?
I remember. Let's see. I probably saw a little bit of it. My parents didn't let me consume a lot of media when I was a child.
Yeah, so it's like one of those. It was sort of like the ancient, or the old timey equivalent of like when the story of like like when you get an alien coming to civilization, and then like a human Earth person explaining like normal things about American civilization, and then the alien being shocked with the absurdity of the ridiculousness of the practice. You know what I mean? Like, if like things that we would take for granted, right? And we say, well,
Right.
we just elected, and things that like you and I would like criticize, like, oh, we just elect the leader to rule over us and do this and that. So it was like the old timey equivalent of that, where instead it was like, Gulliver went to vast lands that had no exposure to English life or whatever, and he explained their it was very foreign, their customs and all that stuff. But when he explained his customs to them, they were also equally as like bewildered by how you could think that sort of life is normal. And
They're like barbaric. Yeah.
exactly. And so it's sort of satirizing the underlying assumption of like civilized society has, that they are, what they do is normal, and what they do is civilized versus the barbaric practices of others. And
That makes sense. That seems like that'd be pretty good. I might have to. Wasn't there?
there's
Wasn't it a book?
Yeah, it was a book first, and I know that they've made like cartoons out of it and
I feel like I've read the book. I feel
movies
like I've
out
read
of
the
it.
book, and I just haven't seen the actual.
You've definitely read individual stories. Like, one of the famous ones is where like Gulliver, I think he like washes up on shore somewhere, or is there some process where
giant, right?
he goes unconscious? Well, the people of that place are really small. He's technically like a normal sized guy from England, right? But then when he goes to this island, it's full of fucking tiny people, and they like tie him down, right? They like strap him down like from head to toe when he's like laying down and asleep, and then he wakes up and he's like captured by these tiny people.
I definitely read it. It was a long time ago. I just never saw like the movies or anything.
Yeah. So long story short, my point is about satire. It was just sort of like, because I mean, it was written obviously for an English audience, or the audience that it was. That, or like it was Gulliver's home people or whatever. So
Right.
It was getting people to kind of examine like the sort of nature of customs and traditions and shit like that we think of like normal as civilized society for us. And that's kind of like the the ancient tradition of satire and of comedy and of jesters, right, in the courts and things, is that they tell people uncomfortable truths that people recognize as real but aren't really comfortable with talking about. Versus,
That's also why they kept him around, isn't it? Is like everybody else was going to kiss their ass. It was like the jester's job not to.
yeah, I feel like I've read some sort of history about jesters and stuff, about how the kings actually appreciated that role and respected it in a certain way. I'm no jester expert, so I can say for sure, but I feel like that's something that I've heard about or read about in limited capacity.
And now they're mouthpieces for the state.
Yeah, now we have people like Stephen Colbert, who does vaccine dances, music videos, and Jimmy Fallon, who
I remember that.
Who did a duet with Ariana Grande talking about how great vaccines. Yeah, this is the state of comedy nowadays.
I'm willing to pay.
But this part is the best.
It's important. It's important. I'm willing to pay $4 a gallon. Hell, I'll pay $15 a gallon because I drive a Tesla.
And
Haha.
People all
and
over
that's the
world
rub.
are trying to find inventive ways to help ordinary Ukrainians.
Yeah, help ordinary Ukrainians. That's the takeaway lesson here is we may be suffering, but it's the price worth paying, and he's willing to sacrifice us all for that, just like Lord Farquaad.
Right.
I think that's a far better movie to get lessons about life from than like Harry Potter or you know, any
God,
any of those other ones.
literally, yeah.
I think Shrek is definitely prime
I mean,
anti-authoritarian content here. Just want to live in a swamp and be chill.
and be left alone with my donkey and my giant girlfriend. See, there you go.
Yeah,
That's all you need.
and the next obviously famous person that we saw this week talking about the noble nature of enduring high price, like just doubling our transportation costs out of nowhere was George Takei.
And again, it's never like somebody who's actually going to be like entirely I mean, they're not going to lose their jobs. They're not going to have to worry about how they're going to get to work. They're not going to have to worry about their food prices going up. They don't have to worry about any of this shit. So it's really easy for them to sit there and try to lecture people about it. And then you have your studio audience, who, I mean, shit, how much would it cost on average, do you think, to actually go live and watch Stephen Colbert perform? Like, none of those people are you or me.
No,
Like,
I love the language of like just the characterization and the definitive like authoritarian nature. As he's Americans, we can endure higher prices for food and gas if it means putting this, like, just the first bit. Like, I don't even give a shit about what it means. Just we can endure higher prices for food. Just declaring that, this party that he's a part of that is so concerned about the plight of the exploited and of the downtrodden. This thing also just endure higher prices for things, like if you're living a paycheck to paycheck and you get like a 40% increase in your daily costs, we can endure it.
Like, you can't pay your electric bill and stuff because you spent all your money on, food and gas and stuff. But hey, man, it's cool. We'll stick it out. No big deal if you get evicted. Whatever. It's for Ukraine. It's for a good cause. Ukraine.
And then, of course, he tells us how we should feel about it afterward. Like, consider it a patriotic donation in the fight for freedom over tyranny.
When did this like bizarre resurgence of nationalism happen on the left?
It's fucking amazing. Like we saw last week with the State of the Union, we could have taken that transcript and put Trump in front of it, had him read that off, and we would have been none the wiser in regards to the rhetoric. We would have completely believed 90% of that speech coming straight out of Trump's mouth.
I mean, this is, I mean, and again, it's like
complete with the chance of USA.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was 2001, 2002. I was like 11 or 12, but I definitely remember like this exact same fucking song and dance being used as justification for invading Afghanistan.
Yeah, it's always been this sort of like fanatical, just one-sided coverage of. I mean, they had coverage on like CNN about the bombings in Iraq with celebrations like wait, we started war, hooray, we're doing great, we're doing good, and we're fighting for freedom.
Remember Iraq? Those like. Well, Iraq, Afghanistan, like the whole thing was like one of those very, we've been attacked and we have to respond. And like, it was very bipartisan, honestly. There wasn't a lot of pushback from major people on either side.
Well, yeah, I mean, because it was Bush and the Republicans, the neocons, basically like lighting a fire of like, listen, we got this evil, radical Islam, and even there was like more moderate figures in the Republican Party, like what was it? It was not Rumsfeld, but the other guy, the Black Secretary of State. I forget what his name was.
Colin Powell.
Colin Powell. Yeah, actually, he was more moderate when it came to Iraq at the time, and he was just steamrolled. over to basically just be used to advocate for defending the invasion like afterwards. But he wasn't he wasn't primarily like in favor of that like when it first popped off. I feel like he had some protests and shit, but there's no chance that he would have gotten
with the program.
Yeah,
so.
And it's just it's been like that. I mean, and then the other primary architect, like I talked about last week, was Joe Biden himself. He was the chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations. He chose the people who went to witness before the Senate to talk about how Saddam was a danger to the United States and his weapons of mass destruction and all this shit. And anybody who said anything about, hey, this sort of proceeding seems a little one-sided. Like, you have a lot of people talking about how great war is, but you don't have a lot of people balancing that out at all. And he's like, nah, you don't get to talk anymore, shut the fuck up. You're silenced. Yeah, he would literally do that kind of shit. And
he was much more cogent back then.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago, so it is kind of interesting to see the deterioration of his mental state.
Actually, that's another thing that we should have gotten articles on, is just how many people nowadays are just admitting that this dude is pretty dang far gone. And he's pretty spaced out when it comes to say, just driving home points and to staying on topic and all that sort of deal. So that's
anytime he speaks, I really don't know why they let him speak anymore. It's kind of embarrassing. You'd think it would be like a mild liability for them, but no.
So speaking of people like letting him speak and liabilities and all that, we have his spokesperson Jen Psaki, who is not much better. She's
not really.
She's far more lucid, but it seems that she doesn't have a lot behind that, because it's pretty impossible to defend a lot of this shit that is going on, and these people are just desperately grasping at straws and desperately trying to make themselves out to be the good guy and hope that people can't see past the fucking 10-inch thick fog of bullshit that they spewed in front of themselves. So yeah, I'm gonna show Jen Psaki talking about gas prices and what she has to say and where she thinks the blame lies.
Oh boy.
Just this week that your gas prices have gone up.
You may have noticed, yeah, that's definitely something that might have struck
just a mild
struck your
bump.
eyes.
Just something you may have checked, may have noticed in passing. No big deal.
I want to talk to you a little bit about why. A lot of it has to do with Vladimir Putin.
Wait, before we do like even just there, I feel like I know I've seen a chart of gas prices over time.
Oh, it's been floating around, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I saw one of those that like pinpointed exactly when the Putin thing started to happen, and
the exponential jump is definitely due to Russian exports being interrupted and stuff like that. That I'll believe. I get that. That's probably true. But
the
fact of the matter is,
I think this is with. This is specifically with Mississippi, I think, but let me see if it's at least the time frame. No, it's from like a year ago. Okay, regardless, there was a huge rise in I should have looked it up before, but there was a huge rise in gas prices before any of this shit got started, and it's definitely not going to help. Sure, that's definitely the gas prices are going to go up further. Oh, that's another clip I should have gotten. What, did you see the interview of him like speaking at like in front of the airport or whatever about the gas prices?
Oh God, no.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll definitely pull that one up after this video.
Okay, cool. Yeah, nice.
The reality is that Russia is one of the 3 largest oil producers in the world. And the fact that they have started this conflict, invaded a foreign country, and they are such a big producer of oil in the world is the reason why the global oil markets are disturbed right now and why your gas prices are going up. The president's going to do everything he can to bring down the price of gas for the American people.
Everything he can.
Now, that's interesting, because when they asked him what he could do about it, he's like, not much. Can't do much.
Okay, yeah, that was the clip that like outside that I was talking about. I'm gonna find it so that we can talk about. But yeah, it was like, you gotta blame Putin.
Can't do much about it. It's Putin's fault.
U.S. production of oil and gas is rising. In fact, in the first year of the Biden presidency, there was more oil and gas produced in the United States than the first year of the Trump presidency. And there's opportunities to produce more from here. But part of this is on the oil companies. Right now, there are 9,000 approved unused permits that oil and gas companies could tap into now to ramp up production. So what the president is doing is ensuring we're taking steps here to get more oil out into the global marketplace. That includes the release of 40 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve back in the fall, and he just announced the planned release of an additional 30 million barrels. The only way to protect the United States over the long term is to become energy independent. That's why the president has been so focused on investing in clean energy technologies, so that we can rely on that and not President Putin to set the price of gas.
So there's
that's a hell of a script right there.
yeah, there's a lot there where they totally deflect. Well, I mean, getting us energy independent, right? Like that sounds great. We could just get us energy independent, use renewable energy, clean energy, and then that'll just be great. You know, that we'll just be better off.
Well, it's easy to say it. I mean, you can say like we're going to become energy dependent, but like, what's the actual strategy for doing it? I mean, if you're talking long term, like what could possibly fuck up those plans? It's great to say it, but it doesn't really. I mean, you're just saying that you're going to do things. Like, it doesn't really mean much.
Video is quiet. Oh shit! Fuck. Let me see. Hold on. Oh, that's why. Okay, I'll pull it up. There we go. All right. Cool. Well,
A lot of it has to do with Vladimir Putin.
There. Okay. Cool. I'm looking at my levels there since Dead Cheese and Wage on Volunteerism. Just let me know it's kind of quiet. But yeah. Now, yeah, the levels.
The reality is that.
Nice.
Oh.
Thank you.
Okay, but the other one, let me see if I can find the one that we were looking at, or that we were talking about now, which was Joe Biden himself. Let's see. Joe Biden blames Putin.
More breaking news to tell you about this morning. Just moments ago, the latest report on inflation.
Just find it on. Honestly, it seems easier to find these sorts of videos on Tumblr than it is to find them on like Google and
That's
like
not shocking.
these like search sites.
That's not entirely shocking.
Oh yeah, that's actually that actually just came across another post that I want to talk about too, which is the whole release of Pfizer's medical documents.
Oh
Or, you know,
shit!
with the adverse events list.
Like, isn't it? It's over 1,000.
Yeah, it's like 1,200.
That sounds like a crazy number, but it's over 1,000.
Yeah, it's like 1,200 something, which is absolutely nuts.
Especially because if you said that a year ago, you'd get, probably deleted off of whatever social media platform you said it on.
Okay, I don't know. I have so many posts that I can find the Biden one. But it was, I mean, we both saw it was pretty sad. To be honest, it was like, what do you have? What was the message that you have to say to the American people about prices? And he's like, they're gonna go up.
They're gonna go up.
I was like, well, fuck, bro. Seriously, that's reassuring.
Yeah. What could you say to the American people? Well, they're gonna go up. Can't do much about it. That was my favorite.
Yeah, blame Putin. And it's like, but there's America though. I'm sure that there's more people that we could blame besides. But I've never met the dude. Well, I haven't met a lot of people in American government either. But I think I'm further away from meeting Vladimir Putin than any of those dudes. And
Like this kind of weird thing they're trying to say, like, well, it's not exactly because of this one thing. It's a complex issue, but it's because of this other one thing. The problem isn't one person. It's not Joe Biden. It's Vladimir Putin, though.
Okay, but the next person, of course, is the next person in charge of the country. Second in command of the entire United States.
And if I can ask you, Madam Vice President,
Kamala Harris.
President Biden has said that Americans will feel some pain for the sake of defending freedom and liberty, but there does seem to be no end game in sight. How long should Americans expect? How long should we be bracing for this really sort of historic inflation and some unprecedented gas prices?
Sure.
Hold on.
Why is she looking at him? I mean, it's a fair question. Like, you're asking people to sacrifice and be miserable for a long time. Like, well, what's the end game? What's the end date? When does it get better? You can't ask people to do this, with just open-ended timeline. Why does she look at him?
No, yeah, it's kind of amazing that she thinks that, like, well, this question about American gas prices, we should look at the guy next to me.
She's waiting for like a prompt or something. I don't get it.
Small adjustment. Yeah. Move on. We are all about on-the-fly issues here. But when she answers the question,
in terms of the discussions that the President, Johannes, and I had, they ranged in subject, including...
Okay, in terms of discussions they both had, I think I missed the question. Hold on.
Liberty. But there does seem to be no end game in sight. How long should Americans expect? How long should we be bracing for this really sort of historic inflation and some unprecedented gas prices?
So again, it's about how the American people should be embracing historic inflation and gas prices, and her response is...
Sure.
I hate... Oh.
In terms of the discussions that the President, Johannes, and I had, they ranged in subject, including the issue of the Black Sea, and I'll let him...
The Black Sea?
The issue of the Black Sea? Like, what is she talking about?
I'm sure that it was brought up at some point in this press conference, maybe. I didn't watch the whole... That was one thing that I considered, right? An hour-long press conference on just these two fucking talking. That might have been something that we could have gone over, but I didn't know how much of it was even, like, interesting content or anything, so I figured
I mean, just this one clip is hard to watch.
Yeah. So I don't understand. It was in terms of what we were discussing, the Black Sea question, not about the Black Sea or even what she was discussing with that motherfucker, but it was about the American people and their situation with inflation and gas prices, which of course she didn't have a script for.
Explain in more detail as he would like, but
she's reading off of something.
Are, again, fully aware and apprised, because we are in constant communication with the President, with his administration here, about the concerns that they have about the entire region and, frankly, the vulnerability.
Well,
again, okay, so again, probably going with the Black Sea bit, but concerns about the region. There's nothing here. Yeah, it had no suitable answer. If the article was about Energy Department,
also what's weird is, like, I'm kind of wondering what the question that was supposed to be asked is, because even then, like, I can't figure out what the answer is. Like, she's not really saying much.
Basically, it's one of those, like, we hear you, we're aware of it, and that's all I got to say about that.
We've been apprised of the situation and we're in communications. Like, okay, but what are we doing? Like, what are we doing about it? You're just telling me that you know it's a problem. We know that you know it's a problem. I just told you.
It's fucking dumb. And we got Otto in the chat too. Good shit.
All you have to do is look at the map.
The two us look at the map. That's wonderful. Also, I think the boys of the Altar podcast are live right now too. I think they stream on Mondays.
Nice,
which is pretty funny.
I mean, did they and does anybody call her on the fact that she doesn't like answer this question, or is it just like this weird awkward silence?
I feel like I've seen articles written about. I don't think in this press conference there was any follow up or any kind of call out. We probably would have been seen it clipped if they had, but there was reaction. Again, great segue, great question to add to a segue. There was reaction to this press conference from some great intellectuals over at The View.
Oh God.
So, right before the show, President Biden pledged to strengthen America's squeeze on Putin on multiple fronts. He talked about the vice president's announcement yesterday that the U.S. is sending Ukraine an additional $53 million in humanitarian aid. But this is the moment from her press conference, which with the Polish president, Kamala's, that the right wing cannot get over. The right wing press. Watch this.
I'm wondering what the United
So obviously it's just immediate poisoning the well of like, well, the right wingers, they just making a big deal about this thing. And, how could they possibly? This is not something that we would have made a big deal about had it happened to Pence or Trump. We're definitely not petty and grasping at straws.
Behar, trying to gripe about a cheap shot is pretty fucking rich.
Yeah. So let's see what outrageous thing, should not be made a big deal that the right wingers are just grasping at for no reason.
United States is going to do more specifically to set up a permanent infrastructure? And relatedly, is the United States willing to make a specific allocation for Ukrainian refugees? And for President Duda, I wanted to know if you think, and if you asked the United States to specifically accept more refugees.
Okay.
So this question was actually directed at the both of them, or at least there was a two-part question that was partly his and partly hers. But I just think it's great that, again, this second in command leader of the country decides, well, if there's two questions, I'm gonna let somebody else fucking answer first. That's
the interaction is just really weird. Like they're not real serious about this, like, at all.
No, yeah, and so even that response was like, okay, it's like, okay, I'm gonna be the one to answer first. I guess you're gonna make me do this sort of deal. It's like, yeah, you're fucking the leader of America here in this situation, so maybe you do speak first.
Good Lord.
Maybe you take a little bit of initiative, leadership. Who would have thunk it? Out of the vice president of the U.S., some leadership? What an amazing expectation that I've never fucking heard from. It's probably because she's a black woman that they have these unrealistic expectations of her, which you think I'm fucking joking about this, like I'm being hyperbolic, or that I'm kind of cartoonishly parroting these guys, but
Friend in need is a friend indeed.
oh, which I love this too.
Is a friend indeed. Okay. A friend in need is a friend indeed.
Okay, I can first.
So again, like this whole a friend in need is a friend indeed, which is like a nod to saying, hey man, like we're only having this cordial relationship because we're backed into a fucking corner and we have no choice.
Yeah,
but like
I was gonna say that kind of it's like a common saying, but I always thought that the point of it was like a little bit of a jab, like not really.
Yeah, exactly. Is that we're only friends because we're in need, right? It's only like the most reliable friend that you can come across is one that is your friend against your will because they've been backed into the situation that they need you. And it's like to make that comment like in a public forum about foreign relations, like that seems weird. Like that seems like, okay, yeah, we're underlying this whole actual friendly nature of this by just talking about the political motivations that underlie this. That's certainly tactful and something that is a sign of good intercommunication and like, relations.
You would joke about like having to help your friend move or something, not hey, there's people being
Yeah, or like, they call you up at like 2 a.m. and they're talking about how drunk they are and how great, they've always loved you and shit. Like, that's the closest thing, was like, yeah, you fucker, of course you'd like me now. You need me. Which, fuck it, whatever. Like, we are friends, but like, listen, you gotta acknowledge the situation of the dynamic here. And that seems a bit weird to talk about in terms of like countries, relying on each other in time of crisis.
Oh, it's definitely weird. I sometimes wonder, like, how much of a functional adult she could like. I don't know, man. She says stuff a lot that's just very
questionable,
extremely questionable. And it's like, how often does she like interact with people, like on a, like, not on television, like just sitting down and like talking to someone? How often does she actually have like human contact? Which, I mean, I guess if I highly doubt that her and Joe Biden are having any friendly chats.
Yeah, they're not sharing ice creams like Obama and Biden did. They were just the best of friends.
They don't really like each other.
Skipping through fields. But so yeah, that's the general takeaway that we can sort of get, immediately after watching this clip and just knowing how she is and how politicians are. That's kind of how so how does the View react to what's going on?
Joy Behar's opinion.
The laugh got them. She went on to say that the U.S. is committed to helping refugees, but some on the right say that this was humiliating. Did you have a problem with any of the way she handled this, ladies? People are talking about it. That I personally think if she was a guy, they would never say it, because they also made fun of Hillary's laugh. Mm-hmm. But I don't see them making fun of Pence's laugh or any of the other guys.
Did he laugh?
Well, they don't laugh very much. But
it's because she's a woman. That's what it is.
And then they undermine it right then and there, but they continue with that narrative or that explanation. It's like, well, she's a woman, so they hate him. They didn't undermine the men laughing because they're not we can't think of any instance where they laugh, but they would. They totally fucking would. I know they would. They're sexist. They're dirty sexists, and so. And yeah, but that's this whole like speculative. It's just the same kind of deal with the whole police interactions. Well, if it was a black guy in this exact same situation, he would have been shot, or if it was a white guy in this exact same situation, he would have lived. And there's no way to know any of that shit. There's no way to confirm. It's not like it's not like male politicians have been made fun of for their gaffes and their mistakes over the years. Come on, we went through 4 years of Kavefe and of all this stupid bullshit from Trump that didn't even matter, despite the fact that there were clear, rational criticisms of Trump, like the war in Yemen, which I'll never stop bringing up. But of course, the left can't criticize the war in Yemen because Obama helped start it.
Oh yeah, that one's untouchable.
Yeah,
like that one's real untouchable for them. That's why they never say anything about it.
Yeah, but they'll keep going with this brilliant commentary here.
He didn't even move the fly that was on his face for like an hour. So
it actually wasn't on his face. It was on his hair.
His hair.
To be fair, we did make fun of that fly.
We did.
To be fair, yeah.
And I don't know that it's about
So
her
fair.
laughing, because I agree. I think that would be very inappropriate, and that's something that they do to women. I think that she has gone on multiple occasions a little bit underprepared with some of the questions that she's been asked. Lester Holt asked her a pretty basic question that she couldn't answer. So I don't know if it's a staff thing. She's not prepared enough. Perhaps she's not expecting the questions. I don't know what it is, but I think that's the issue. This is like the 4th or 5th time.
What it is that they constantly.
So this is like the mildest of criticism that she could possibly fucking get. That is still giving her the benefit. I don't know if it's some staff or, there's somebody else I can blame for this. Please give me somebody else to blame. I just need somebody. But, at least they're recognizing that there's, nothing, this doesn't seem very perfect here. There's some thing to dig, right? And that's the most like the harshest criticism you'll have, from the View here.
Like fucking normal. Like as you said, like it's like the 5th or 6th time it happened. It's kind of hard to ignore it when it's like a repeated pattern of like the same shit happening over and over and over again. And it's on live television. They can't, they can't make it go away. So now they're just kind of like, Yeah, they're gonna really mildly, finally admit that maybe it's a little weird.
Yeah. So how can she she be unprepared when they get the scripts ahead of press conferences and pre-approved questions? Because some people go off script, and of course, normal people who are aware of their responsibilities might, sort of think that it's important to be informed about these issues that are affecting, people in their constituency. But she only felt that she needed to memorize the questions or the answers that answered the pre-approved questions, rather than the ones that might actually hold her responsible. And no, we're not taking celebrity talk shows as actual information. We're taking it as information on how normies will react to these sorts of things and what sort of narratives that they're being told. Right?
You'd be shocked. They'll get their news from shows like The View. This is how they consume media. They don't make informed opinions. They watch shit that they know is already going to pander to their. And this is true of a lot of people on both sides. It really is. People aren't going to sit and watch something necessarily to. I mean, it's entertainment. That's what it is. So why would they watch something for entertainment that makes them feel uncomfortable? But this is how they get their news. This is how they get their opinions.
Yeah. So we're not expecting some rock solid and some diamond takes from these sorts of people, but we are expecting to get a glimpse of how normal people react to these ideas and what sort of narratives and webs they concoct in their brains to explain what they see. And that's what this is about.
Question the qualifications of Black women, and that's why people are saying that she's unprepared. And
I disagree. I think she's
you
a
can
very
disagree, but that's
woman.
the truth of it. And so this is based in racism. This is based in misogyny, and we're talking about a woman that has extensive experience abroad, extensive experience as an attorney, extensive experience as the chief legal officer of one of our largest states in the country. And I think this is just much ado about nothing. I mean, we didn't talk about Vice President Pence's, the right didn't talk about his handling of the COVID epidemic, which I think, or the AIDS epidemic, which I think led to, thousands and thousands of deaths. And what they're talking about is her laugh. She was there as an emissary, really, and she wanted to reassure the NATO allies that that as Russia steps up its attacks on Ukraine, that the United States was going to be supportive. In fact, she's in, I think, Bulgaria right now. She is prepared. She is seasoned.
So there's a lot there.
Like, she's not gonna fuck you. Jesus Christ.
And it's so funny how they can bring up things like her record and her history, but then when you actually try to get down to the details of that record and history, suddenly it's just the unfair criticism of a Black woman who, how dare you? And well, one thing is that as some, supposed, Black progressive woman who's the representation of the downtrodden, you would expect her legal record to reflect that in some way and to be on the defensive of the downtrodden or exploited or whatever the fuck you want to call them, right? The victims of systemic racism.
Yeah.
And then you look at the arrest records of my home state, California, and what was done under her reign. Was it defending, nonviolent drug offenders, and was it, making sure that people put under the thumb of bureaucracy were helped out in any sort of way? No fucking way.
It was the exact opposite.
No, and then when people legitimately bring up this issue, it's just sidestepped. It's again this whole "I'm a Black woman" sort of defense, even when it's a fucking hate this term, woman of color, that's bringing it up. When Tulsi Gabbard fucking brought up that shit, everybody, like, she was called the Russian puppet by Hillary Clinton.
Remember, it's not necessarily about deflecting the criticism with anything substantial. You're looking for a knee-jerk reaction. So they go with stuff like, you're just a racist. And I mean, sometimes that's really all you have to say for people. They'll just accept it. Oh, yep, that's got to be it. They're racist. I don't like hearing this criticism, so I'm going to seize onto the first justification that I can think of for why this is wrong, whether it makes any sense or not.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's criticizing Kamala Harris for being a black woman. Nobody's mad that Kamala Harris is a black woman. They're pissed because she's a fucking dumpster fire.
Yeah, and that nothing she's tried to accomplish, like legally or politically, has been good or positive, not even for the people that she professes to defend and to represent. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know where this this narrative of like Kamala Harris being this like progressive, champion of minorities' rights came from. I really don't. It just came out of nowhere. Well, she's a black woman, so therefore, there's no actual evidence of it.
But she's a cop. And, the left hates cops, didn't they? Or I don't know.
Oh, like, well, they used to. They used to.
Did you see that one screenshot of the Antifa account that was talking about the crackdown on the Canadian truckers? Where he's like, I'm usually ACAB, but in this situation, you guys are doing the right thing.
In this situation, you guys are doing it right. Yeah.
And we've been predicted that shit beforehand. It's like, all you ACAB motherfuckers are absolutely hypocrites when it comes, because all you do is advocate for state control over people's opinions and their way of life. And
well, it's like you could already call most of them fake, because it's the same people that suddenly became these like revolutionaries during the Trump administration and stuff. Were all the exact same talking heads that during Obama's administration were talking about shit like gun control. And it's like, listen, if what you're talking about are stricter background checks, a digital national registry, you're talking about restricting what guns people are allowed to buy, you're talking about more restrictions on just like people, how do you enforce any of this without cops?
Yeah.
Like, you're talking about expanding the law. You are talking about adding more power to your average police officer's arsenal when it comes to people that they can pull over and arrest. It doesn't make any sense, and they act like that they could enforce gun control without cops. And what it really boils down to is they don't want cops, they want federal cops. They want to federalize the police.
Yeah, and you can see that in just the difference in advocacy. Again, we talked about last week the whole anti-war left between Bush Jr., and his war on terror versus Obama. It's like the amount of like marches and anti-war rallies and things that were going on during Bush's years, calling him all of the most drastic things, saying he's Hitler and all this sorts of stuff. And then those same people, when Obama came around, and continued the wars and started new wars. And I was just like, let's go, motherfucker. And yeah, they were all fucking silent. And, we're talking about, you bring up Syria and Yemen. And I brought this up to a year and a half ago to like my progressive roommates at the time, who thankfully don't live with me anymore. And they're just like, well, this war is kind of this normal reality of life now and stuff. I'm like, I don't know if that's the thing I want to accept in society. I think that's one of the things that I want to oppose with all of the fiber of my fucking being.
Well, yeah, it's like they act like the full scale war as it occurs today is exactly synonymous with just like general human conflict, and it's not. I mean, it's not at all. It's very, very different. I don't think a lot of people understand exactly how a lot of wars are even carried out anymore. And on top of that, I mean, the
multiple fronts of it, because we could talk about like the whole human rights issues and the destruction of it that occurs, but also like, how the fuck does all of this get funded? How do we even have the money to pay for all these weapons? And that's when it comes to the manipulation of the money supply and the Federal Reserve, and how there's entire industries like arms industries that only exist because the US government funds their existence to make weapons of war. And the only reason that the government has the money to fund their existence is because they've printed it up and devalued our currency and basically leached it off of the American people without even needing to take any taxes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And And yeah, just all aspects of this just are an absolute clusterfuck. That any like when you try to even apologize for just the smallest of incursions, I gotta scratch my head at you and be like, listen, motherfucker, you realize what the fuck you're saying is acceptable right now?
Well, it's also one of those, like, a lot of a lot of people, again, they're not being affected by it. It's out of sight, out of mind. They see it on the TV, so it is removed from them. It's desensitized. I mean, think about it. Like, what, 2001? We were at war through like 3 presidencies, and I think people just kind of got used to it. And yeah, it's like it's just like kind of a thing. It just happens. It's it's part of life. We go to war.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
you remember during the Trump presidency, we were starting to get those stories of those stories of the soldiers who were like, this soldier was, started the war in 2001, or his fought in the initial invasion of Iraq in 2001, and now his son is joining the military, and now his son was born after that, and then now he's old enough to go to war himself, and it's just like, that's fucking nuts.
Like, I saw that, and it almost seemed like it was being spun as this
inspirational story of
bizarrely inspirational story, and I'm like, that's fucking horrifying. You're basically saying that this is 2 generations of
people's lives that we've wasted.
Absolutely. And like, for what? I mean, look what it boiled out to. Like, what did it boil down to? Like, we did all that and then pulled out of Afghanistan, and it was like a complete shit fuck. The whole thing was terrible.
Oh my gosh, if you want to read some infuriating shit, read Scott Horton's books about the war on terror. The first one was Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan. That was written a couple years ago. I forget exactly when, but I read that a little while ago, and it just fucking enrages you because of how manipulative the entire process was, and how preventable it all was, and how useless and wasteful it was for us, for our lives, for our money, for the people of the Middle East, everybody. And it's just, and then he puts out Enough Already, which doesn't just go over Afghanistan, but goes over the entire war on terror. So you got Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, Libya, all of that. I think even Somalia is mentioned there as well. And so he goes over the history of that, the entirety of that region up until I think 2018 or 2019, because I think it was just published last year. I want to say that it was just published. It didn't. It was pretty recently that was. Okay. And his knowledge on foreign policy and the history of especially our involvement with the Middle East in the area is just second to none. His debate against neocon Bill Kristol is another great piece of just clips and stuff that we can definitely check out sometime, because he's just so he's so knowledgeable and and quick with being able to just pull up specific things about U.S. actions and policies and hypocrisies and all this sorts of shit with regarding to the foreign policy. And the Scott Horton show, his podcast is really good because he interviews just tons of people from the actual still alive anti-war left, because there is an anti-war left journalist, movement or life that still exists, and they're critical.
They're still around.
They're critical of our support of Israel. They're critical of any kind of pro-war propaganda type shit, and he's a great source because he'll interview fucking anybody who has legitimate information to give you about foreign policy and about those sorts of issues. And he has a great 2-hour speech that he gave just, I think, a week and a half ago, maybe, going over the entire history of the situation in Ukraine and the history of the factions and the players and what was being done to lead up to all of this stuff without, stroking Putin's dick or, fucking apologizing for all of that shit. Like, there's plenty of criticism to go around. But like
that might be something we ought to watch. I mean, I'd be interested in hearing it, but that might be something we could go over next week because
yeah,
I feel like a lot of people don't really understand like what's been going on. Really all they've got is Russia invaded Ukraine, and like they know,
and that's bad.
Nothing about
and that's
before that. Yeah.
Listen, Hominis, that's bad. Okay, don't you know that is a bad, and therefore that's all I gotta know about anything is.
That's it. Like
bad.
Who knows what came before it? Russia invaded Ukraine, so that's bad. And Ukraine is the obviously a very liberal democracy. There's no bad people in Ukraine or in the government, and there's nothing that could have possibly happened before now that may have helped lead up to this on Ukraine's end. Russia has basically attacked a small child walking down the street with a lollipop.
Exactly. I have Otto asks, have y'all heard of the Blowback podcast? And I feel like I've heard the name of that podcast. I definitely, obviously, have heard the term blowback, which is pretty famous among people who criticize the war on terror, which is just this idea that, listen, if we're going to fight terrorism or do anything where we attack the infrastructure of, a foreign country, that maybe the people who live there might not like it that much. And
weird.
Might oppose us and do things.
What a concept.
That oppose us if we, kill their family members and their villages and stuff. They'll have a reaction. And
they won't they won't see us as heroes. What do you mean?
Yeah, but I haven't heard the podcast. I feel like if I did look it up, it would probably have people that I've heard of. So let's see. Blowback podcast. Who we got? Actually, I don't know these people. Noah Cohen and Brendan James. But looks like the first season was dedicated to the Iraq War, and they show audio clips of MSNBC and CNN, readings of news reportings, as well as some skits. Oh, with H. John Benjamin, huh? Interesting.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, and the second season talks about the intervention in the Cuban Revolution. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'll definitely check this out then. Because always looking for a nice H. John Benjamin. I love that dude. He's great. So
I was just watching season 4 of Archer today.
Yeah, I need to resume that because it's been a long time since I watched that show. It's pretty funny. But I don't remember what the hell else these ladies said about this, so it's gonna be a surprise to me if there's anything of substance in those last 2 minutes.
Abroad, she gets wonderful marks across the board, but this is just something that I think happens to women and especially Black women.
And you're right about that. Look, anybody who says that Kamala Harris is not a qualified person, that Kamala Harris is not a serious person. Really needs to go back and check where that's coming from. Because if you think a child of immigrants who is from Southeast Asia and has a Jamaican father.
I'm a child of an immigrant. What's up? Can't talk shit on me now? Is that how that works? I can just say whatever I want and y'all can't criticize me?
If you're an immigrant, you can't be a fucking dipshit, and you can never be wrong. And no matter what the position is, clearly, because you're an immigrant, your whole life has been a struggle because you're a dirty immigrant. And so, she knows better than all of us. It's kind of this bizarre, we call it what it is. It's still racism because they are assuming that because you're an immigrant, it's kind of the Joe Biden, they're just as smart thing. And it's like, well, yeah, nobody thought that they weren't. What are you talking about? Like, what is? Yeah.
And it actually reminds me of one time I had an interaction with Anna Kasparian on Facebook because we have a mutual friend, And there was I actually didn't know that she was friends with this dude, but I wasn't surprised when I found out, because he is he was a YouTube personality, and he's had a podcast, and he's a progressive, and he's done political advocacy, and I think he might have even interviewed Bernie Sanders at one point. But yeah, apparently he was friends with Anna Kasparian, and there was like a video that he had posted about the Young Turks, and I talked some shit, right? And then she just pops up to respond, and I was like, "Oh shit, she's actually here! Fuck it, this is great." And then again, she was like being sort of like dismissive and condescending, and I'm like, "Listen, man, I'm like this poor, boy who's the child of a single mother immigrant lady, and you're just this big privileged lady, who's got a lot of money and power, and I don't know, like how this whole situation plays out for your progressive politics here, like this seems like a really one-sided situation, despite the fact that I'm of course miles smarter than her. So I mean, she can't know that I'm fucking brilliant and she's an idiot, because but I knew that, so I didn't hold her I didn't hold it against her for not recognizing that she should defer to me because of my underprivileged situation. I don't know if she remembers the last time it was like to live paycheck to paycheck, but I sure fucking do.
Yeah, right.
And so yeah, that was just a little like funny thing that tickled me, and it's this whole sort of thing that like I should be the beneficiary of this whole progressive, stack benefit of the doubt, right? At least in some way.
Opinion.
But yeah, it was it's the same as if the other like famous minority progressives get, which is that they're just Uncle Toms and tokens and like, oh, they're the only black guy or the only minority that is the one who agrees with you and stuff. And well, you can eat a dick with that whole pile of bullshit, because none of that matters, right? The identity of who the fuck is talking, who agrees with you, don't mean shit.
It's definitely not as important as they make it out to be. I mean, you can argue like perspective and stuff like that, sure, but it's not like a catch-all, gotcha. It really isn't.
No, well, it isn't in reality, but if you delve further into the whole academic like origins of wokeness and of woke history, and it stems more from feminism, because that was the first like woke subject to get ingrained in universities, and there was an idea called standpoint theory that literally proposes that people of quote unquote underprivileged backgrounds have a higher form of viewpoint, of standpoint, than the privileged class, because the subjective like experience, or the experience of them being exploited, is a perspective that only they have access to and not the privileged class. But then they also have access to the privileged point of view because they live under the privileged people's boot or whatever. And so it's quite literally that they have access to knowledge that the privileged are incapable of knowing to the degree that they know it. And so this is the sort of thing that underlies. Now, this lady probably doesn't know that the history of that bullshit, right? But this is the sort of academic background that underlies woke thinking that started with feminism and feminist epistemology, they called it in academia, and then it transferred over to like critical race theory and critical gender theory, and colonial theory and all that.
Critical race theory isn't real, remember?
Oh yeah. No, it's a legal theory, but also it's not, and also we're not teaching it in schools. But if kids are learning it, how bad really is it? But it's not real. Also.
And if you want to ban it, you're a racist, even though it's not real though.
Yeah, mapping the margins was one of the key writings informing the woke movement. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I don't remember the exact subjects of that book, but I know I've heard it before. You did mention it earlier in the chat that I didn't bring up. Yes, mapping the margins. I've definitely heard that book, and that was a key in sort of forming the whole, what we know is kind of like cultural Marxism or neo-Marxism, right? Is this whole transferring of the whole proletariat and bourgeoisie dynamic over to something other than class, and mapping it onto race, and mapping it onto LGBT status and all that sort of stuff. And these people don't know about that fucking history and what it means. But I think it's really, I'm just always just a fucking curious motherfucker. And it's like, okay, well, why the hell do these people justify all this shit? Like, where does these ideas come from? And I'm gonna fucking start writing down a bunch of because we got a bunch of future ideas that we can cover, which is another thing that was called the science wars, which is this whole idea of epistemology, which is the study or the study of how what of knowledge, what it means to know something, right? What does it mean to say this is definitely knowledge and this is what we can use to learn about the world from. And so standpoint theory is one idea of epistemology because it comes from the idea of knowing based off of your standpoint, based off of your categorization within society. And of course that's not the only way, and that's definitely not the right way to look about things, but it's important to see, like, as if people are going to talk about what benefits society, right, or what benefits certain groups, then it's important to know, like, what are they even claiming is knowledge? What are they even claiming is, how can we even measure what is beneficial or what is not beneficial to who,
right,
or what, or to all that shit. And so it's wild. It gets fucking crazy. Like, so that's what I mean is that, like, it's on the surface, it seems like, oh, just this wishy-washy thing that, like, people are sort of saying without thinking, but it's an actual academic discipline that is just fucking nuts. The people with PhDs write about this shit and cover it and just, project onto society.
I'm glad that, I mean,
go ahead.
I wouldn't consider myself an academic in any capacity, and I'm kind of glad. I mean, I still went to college and stuff. I didn't finish because it was too fucking expensive, and
yeah, I completed at most a couple semesters myself. That was it.
I still had to take a few entry level classes and stuff. You always do, which, I mean, a lot of them were, honestly, now that I look back on it, I'm like, why did I have to take those? I was trying to get a degree in ceramics because I wanted to teach. Which, honestly, now that I think about it, fucking stupid. But I'm really glad that I ended up having to take a lot of these more, like, social justice type classes. I have a few friends that are taking them, and, like, some of the stuff that they come back with is ridiculous.
Oh yeah, I know several, like, high school friends who just, yeah, now they're like like they're teachers themselves and shit. And it's one of them is like Chicano studies or immigrant studies or something like, so they like majored in woke subjects and studying history and shit like that from that perspective. I was like, oh man, I'm so glad I did not go to college to learn about this shit, like, directly from these motherfuckers, because I don't know if I would have, like, bought it hook, line, and sinker, but there was definitely a danger there because I was already a general, like, leftist punk rocker and sort of just considered myself, like, anti-authoritarian, but, like, from that perspective. And so if I had received more education that, like, reaffirmed that mindset and that sort of framework, then
I think in that environment it also becomes a lot easier because, I mean, you're having, it's that sort of reward system. You want to not necessarily give the true answer. You're trying to give the right answer. So you'll regurgitate whatever they're teaching you, whether it's true or not, whether you really believe it, in order to, you're being
get by.
Rewarded. It's a grading system. You're being rewarded until eventually you do start, like, believing it. Like, it's true. You start believing it. You start being indoctrinated, and that's exactly how it works. I mean, it's what it is.
We got DTM telling you, we'll never let you live that specific degree down now that we know about it, huh?
That's okay.
He's like,
yes, I went.
He's like Sam Hyde Jr. now.
I went to a fucking liberal arts college and was trying to get a degree in ceramics. Yeah. Which is funny because, I mean, I started with a background in, kiln fire, that kind of stuff. And now I still do sculpture, but none of it involves ceramics. So, I mean, a lot of it ended up helping me out in the long run, but I paid a lot of money to do it. And I was actually, right after college, I ran out of money. I was homeless for like a year. So, but it all worked out. I'm not homeless now. And it did give me some good perspective on a lot of things, I think.
Yeah, we all learn from our past.
Yeah, it's certainly not something I regret.
What else do these people have to say? It's all interesting. So brilliant.
Went to law school in the best law schools, became, got to where she is, was one of the top prosecutors in asking questions in the Judiciary Committee. When she was
Which
in the
questions?
Senate. If you think that happened because she's not serious or because she's not qualified, then you should go qualify your heart and qualify your opinions. But
I think it happened because she sucked a lot of dick.
Right?
Let's be honest.
They have an obsession.
And it's just, I don't know. It's just so funny to me that how much cope is going on here, right?
I mean, it's a known fact that that's what she did to get where she is. It's a known fact. It's not like it's not just me being a misogynist or anything.
Just edgy.
Literally, what I would think, just as I wouldn't think of anybody highly, even if it was a guy who fucked his way to the top of his position. Like, I'd still think that was fucking skeezy. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Doesn't have anything to do with sexism. It means that you can't do your fucking job, and the only reason you're there is because you fucked somebody who put you there. I mean,
yeah, like if that didn't fucking happen, it would be one thing. But if it did, then it says something. It's meaningful. You can't just be like, listen, you're only bringing that up because, well, I mean, I can bring it up though, right? Like, it's real. Like, it's not something that, we just made up and it's just some fantasy shit. Like, regardless of your whole deflection of my reasons for bringing something up, you can't deny that it's real. You can't deny that it's there.
It's still happening. Honestly, it's important. It's relevant because of the position that she held. It was a really high position. The more they talk up what positions she had, the worse it looks, because it's like, yeah, and she wasn't qualified for any of it. Like,
but if you're questioning, like, the qualification of somebody to attain the highest position, it's like, listen, man, she was probably qualified for some job, but not fucking this one. Not this one. Okay, we can call that out without you fucking pitching a whine about the intentions and all that. Yeah.
Over Kamala Harris laughing. Guess what? She laughs. I think it's a crutch she uses. This was a 50-minute, very serious press conference. They always do this. They take the 5 seconds where she laughs, and they play it over and over and over again. It's not like she spent 50 minutes laughing.
That was the final question.
And it was a very lengthy question. I think they were laughing at the fact that the question had and
it was repetitive because they had handled that.
Something just occurred to me because I was watching.
And The View is never focused on a 10-second clip and made fun of it. Certainly not about a fly that Pence is completely in no way controlling, right? Has no way of I mean, yeah, he could just fucking smack himself in the face and get the fly off of him. But if it did that, I bet they would have something to say about that shit too.
The View has never been anything but razor sharp political commentary. We all know that.
Yeah, especially from Joy.
That movie Game Change last night, which is about Sarah Palin. Happened to be running on, and during those years, everybody was on her case. Yeah, correctly, I think. She really didn't know what she was doing.
See, so when they do it, well, correctly though, this time we did it for a good reason. But when it happens to the black lady, not a good reason.
She really wasn't prepared. She really didn't, and so maybe this is payback for that. Who knows? I just thought of that this morning.
Yes, we're trying to pay back Kamala Harris for Sarah fucking Palin.
Well, we
see again the whole Russia from her backyard. It's like, I don't think that's exactly what I don't remember the exact context of that comment. I think it was kind of like dumb in general, but I don't think it was like, I can see Russia, therefore I'm a good negotiator. I forget exactly what her fucking point was with that. But again, it's just sort of this thing that is probably generally a thing that you could sort of shrug off and be like, that's just kind of a silly thing about a politician. But the fact that they jumped on it so fucking hard, right? And then they're trying to play off this instance is like, oh, they're just looking for all the excuses and jumping on any old thing like we would never do.
It's like Sarah Palin didn't get elected. They lost that election, which, I mean, honestly, I don't think would have made a difference either way, because you either had a choice between McCain or Obama. I mean, really.
Yeah, I mean, McCain is fucking one of my biggest fucking scum. I remember the day he died, and I had some shots in celebration because Fuck that guy.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of people did. There was quite a lot of.
I think that election was the one where he had the speech and he made the joke about bombing Iran, where he made it to the tunes of the Beach Boys song, Barbara Ann. Where he's like bomb, 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 Iran, and it was just like, bro, really, I don't even have to try to fucking call you a warmonger. Just look at this fucking shit. Yeah. So.
Insane.
So yeah, no. There's no world in which I'm asking people to give McCain and Sarah Palin the benefit of the doubt for our own interests. It's just amazing to see the turnaround, even if the narrative of being a woman is the same.
Oh, the pivot is quick for sure.
We went after her. We were hard on her. We were hard on her. Now the right wants to be hard on Kamala.
The qualifications for Kamala.
People are still angry about Sarah Palin. I mean, they're still mad
Seriously?
at the Supreme Court for putting in somebody that we did, the Bork, that we bought the guy. They're paying us back for that.
I do think there's something very particular about Kamala. Look, they don't want Kamala Harris to be the person who's at bat to be the next nominee for Democrats. They want to make sure that they undermine her so that she doesn't have an advantage.
She wasn't even wanted by Democrats. Do we remember her primary fucking performance? Like how much people actually voted for her?
She was the worst.
She was practically nobody. Yeah, exactly.
And she got picked up as the vice president. Like they're acting like she was, one of the top 3. Like she never was, because again, she's fucking terrible. People know her track record and she just can't answer questions.
They act like she earned anything in this situation that she has now, but it's literally like Biden before picking her was like, well, it's got to be a black woman, right? Like that's all I got to do. Like I'm a white guy, it's got to be a black woman. I can't do anything else.
Gotta pick players. She literally squeaked by on that. That's it. If there had been another one, they probably would have picked her instead.
Yeah, exactly. 1% of the primary vote. Yeah, and it was it was pathetic. So this idea that they're just criticizing her out of nowhere for no fucking reason, and she's just so qualified and she was so prepared to do the job, but they just looking for any old excuse to criticize her.
I mean, they're sort of right. I really would hate if Kamala Harris was the fucking president of the United States. For obvious reasons.
Yes, most fucking definitely so.
If and when that position is open and she tries to run for it, and I think it irks them. I think
she did run for it.
Aspects about President Obama that irked some people, and yes, absolutely, there's a racial aspect to it.
All right, so Martha Raddatz is live in Lviv, Ukraine.
Yeah. That's the end of that business. And so yeah, that's what the mainstream, sort of people are saying about Ukraine, about the whole gas prices, all that stuff that's been going on. And so I thought I would give a couple of websites that people can look at for actual news on stuff, on actual reporting, to see if maybe there's some different shit. And one great place is called the Gray Zone, and it's a generally neutral website that has left wingers and right wingers, and yeah, it's been covering Ukraine lately. It covers Israel a lot, and Trucker Convoy it covered a little bit, and yeah, and they do real things. Max Blumenthal is a great reporter. He has a book called Goliath, which is his coverage of when he went to Israel. It was after 2007 or so. There was a big conflict. I think it was in 2011 because there was a lot of hullabaloo back in 2011 about some shit. And so he went, and he's Jewish and has Jewish heritage, and so he could go into the parts of Israeli society that were only available to true Jews or whatever, to full-blooded Jews. And so he could get people's perspective on on different just straight from the fucking horse's mouth, right? And because you won't believe how racist some Israelis are when it comes just open and nationalistic, right? And right-wing nationalists that they are. And so yeah, you'll get, especially from their education about Arabs and about Palestinians, it's some wild shit. And so he does a lot of very fair reporting, just on the ground types of stuff. And so yeah, and you'll even see this article here from the 4th. how Ukraine's Jewish president Zelensky made peace with neo-Nazi paramilitaries on front lines of war with Russia. And, you know, obviously it talks about the Azov battalion and the common defense that a lot of leftists have. It's like, well, you know, the president's Jewish, so, you know, you can't call him, you know, in bed with Nazis. That's impossible. He's a Jewish, and like no Jews ever helped out Nazis before or anything. That's definitely nothing that's happened.
I mean, I've heard people say that he's Catholic. I've heard people say that he's Jewish, but it's like, okay, in like what capacity? I know plenty of people who are quote unquote Catholic, but they're not really Catholic. You know, it's like, I don't know.
And so yeah, this is a great spot to look at stuff. And they even have a YouTube channel with a lot of good videos, that even stuff that we could check out later on, some longer stuff, right? So they have more long frame like interviews about the history of stuff like in Ukraine and Yemen especially, which are, you know, obviously two of the most forefront and like current issues in war that are going on. So the fact that they openly cover both of those issues is pretty awesome. And then the other, which is Scott Horton's sort of media organization, antiwar.com, and his podcast, Anti-War Radio.
I've seen this one. Okay.
Yeah. And so they have a lot of really good stuff because they are like a hub that links to all sorts of other places, right? That do articles and news reports and things like that. And so they will link stuff. I know this one was recently linked, right? Which is a great one to look at because it's like, okay, we're the ones who are talking about valiantly defending the innocent against tyranny and authoritarianism. And, you know, Saudi Arabia executes 81 people in a day, and we still fund their war in Yemen. And yeah, convicted of various crimes.
Saying Saudi Arabia is the moral choice between, you know, buying oil from Russia or buying oil from Saudi Arabia, and it's like, is it really? I mean, is there any functional difference?
Yeah, and so, you know, you can see that with like the mass executions, and then this other report, what was it, that they led yet another airstrike in Yemen.
Yemen,
yep. Yeah, with
Yep. I saw that one too.
Yeah, lots of vehicles destroyed and some casualties. And so yeah, this is an ongoing thing. It's a big humanitarian crisis issue, you know, what have you. And yeah, antiwar.com is a great place to like get information. Scott Horton Show, which is his podcast. Yeah, you can see here on the screen, he has his Fool's Errand about Afghanistan, Enough Already, which is about the war on terror. Great Ron Paul, which is a compilation of the interviews that he's done on his podcast with Ron Paul, and different things that they've talked about over the years, going back to 2004. And so yeah, that's I haven't looked much at that one, but I know I've seen Ron Paul, you know, interviewed tons of times, and he's a great guy to talk to. And I think that talking to Scott Horton, you know, great guy on foreign policy, is definitely a good some good back and forth there. And then where is it? His actual interviews. Yeah, and so this is his actual podcast. He's got this. Oh, he's got a new speech actually. It was because today's the 14th. Yeah, so today's is a speech on Yemen and Ukraine at the New Jersey Libertarian Convention. Max Blumenthal again from the Gray Zone talking about the neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Other people talking about Ukraine and Russiagate itself. So yeah, lots of really great episodes, and usually he covers a lot of really currently occurring things, but also delves into history as well. So yeah, lots of good stuff with Scott Horton, antiwar.com. And then the only other thing that I had going on was basically I wanted to go over like a video. It's like an animated review of Thomas Sowell's Conflict of Visions, his book of Conflict of Visions, which I have talked about on Tumblr before. And it was one of the first books that like helped me look at like left-right dynamics a little bit like deeper, right, and further beyond just like what they were professing to advocate for, like the the end result of whatever they were aiming at, and look at like the nature of the advocacy. And I don't know, have you ever heard of like when I've mentioned this like in posts in the past before at all?
No, but it's also really hard for me to keep up with a lot of stuff, especially when I keep getting like deleted across multiple blogs. So I usually miss a lot of things.
No, that's fine. It's and I don't expect anybody to just know all of the things that I've posted about for the past
I try to keep
10
up
years.
with a good handful of people though, because you've got everybody gets on there and shit posts and stuff, and that's all well and good. But I also like to learn from other people, so I do try to keep up with a good handful of people, and most of them I manage to find even after I get deleted and stuff like that. But no, what's this one?
Okay, so yeah, Thomas Sowell, he has a book called The Conflict of Visions, which is about how the left and right looks at how to solve problems, or just generally, or at least these two visions, not necessarily the left and the right itself, but there's just two approaches to solving the society's problems, and how they can look at something differently, have the intention of solving that problem, but come about it two different like methods of doing it, and think that they're the rational one in the equation based off of their vision that they have, which is like their assumptions about society and about people. So it was again like one of the first things that like kind of switched me from thinking about just like radical leftism being the positive for society, and generally looking at like it more from a, at least at the time, more neutral perspective on. But then now that like when you learn this kind of lesson, then when you start to see people's advocacy and their like fanaticism and that sort of stuff, their certainty with this, their certainty in the face of the fact that they're fucking wildly off base, right? And, that, and so then you can actually sort of like where the motivation for this sort of thing comes from.
Okay.
And so that's what the book is about. This is kind of like a 15-minute like review of those ideas using this dude drawing along with it to kind of literally illustrate the point. And so yeah. Music. There we go.
One of the curious things about political opinions is how often the same people line up on opposite sides of different issues. The issues themselves may have no intrinsic connection with each other. They may range from military spending to drug laws to monetary policy to education. Yet the same familiar faces can be found glaring at each other from opposite sides of the political fence again and again. That's how Thomas Sowell's book Conflict of Visions starts. Sowell argues the reason for this curious phenomenon is because both groups of people have fundamentally different assumptions about human nature and human abilities. These set of assumptions are rarely acknowledged or even recognized as influencing people's opinions on such a wide variety of issues. But once you understand the conflict of visions, you understand this ideological battle that has been raging for centuries. So, in order to understand this conflict of visions, we first need to understand what a vision is. A vision is a pre-analytic cognitive act. Well, no, scratch that. A vision is like your gut feeling of how the world works. Essentially, it's a set of assumptions about human nature and our capabilities. These set of assumptions give us simple formulas so that we can understand, or at least believe we understand, how the world works and why people do what they do. For example, let's say we have two people arguing about why we go to war with each other. You could get two completely different answers that stem from different visions. For example, person A might say, well, wars occur because people are people. We're greedy, lustful, and generally a pretty terrible bunch, and that's not going to change. Frankly, it's amazing we ever made it out of the savannah without murdering each other, trying to get to the other side of the continent first. Person B might respond with, no, you're wrong. People are inherently good and rational. War only occurs because we have these large institutions like organized religion and corporations and governments that end up creating paranoia, fear, or misunderstandings that override our reason and lead us to go to war. Both people are, ideally, trying to figure out how to prevent war, but you can see how their completely different visions or underlying assumptions of people are people versus people are good and rational would cause them to reach completely different conclusions about how to go about preventing war. This is,
and though like Sowell isn't anarchist or an anti-statist or anything like that, but I think a lot of this also will play into how with assumptions about what people have about the role for the state and how the state will benefit people's lives or not benefit people's lives.
Right.
You know, because you can see this sort of thing with, you know, when you say you don't want the government to be the police and to, you know, rule over people's lives. And then you say, well, you know what, then who's going to, you know, mold society to not be crazy and, you know, and violent and, you know, create, like, prevent warlords from taking over and this sort of stuff. And so, you know, I just keep in mind that, like, even though it's about like societal institutions that can, like in Soul's case, can be governmental institutions, but even like when we think about like how we assume we can organize each other without government, this is also a really good lesson to keep in mind.
Okay.
Is the conflict of visions. It's a set of assumptions you have, often never thought about, that influence your thinking on how the world works and how to fix it. Since visions are so rarely examined but have such a profound impact, Soul states that the purpose of his book is to think about them. Soul describes what could be thought of as a spectrum for visions. On the one side of this vision spectrum is constrained, and on the other side is unconstrained. I personally think it's easier to look at the two sides as limited and unlimited, but he wouldn't call them that. In reality, visions can be anywhere on this spectrum. For example, Marxism is actually a hybrid of both visions, whereas fascism is in multiple places at once, it seems. But for ease of understanding, the spectrum of all possible visions is split up into two distinct groups to illustrate the differences. The goal for public policy people of either vision is usually to create the best outcome for society. The problem is the core assumptions are so different from each other that they never end up agreeing on the same way to get to the same destination. At the core of each vision is some belief about human nature. Essentially, what are people's ultimate potential? Both visions see the base or starting point of human nature as flawed and imperfect, that people are selfish and just barely smart enough to get by. The constrained vision doesn't see these factors as changing. It says our base nature will always be that of a self-centered, just smart enough person. The unconstrained vision sees the exact opposite. Yes, it says people start off by being just smart enough and self-centered, but we can change our human nature to be closer and closer to perfection. This is a critical difference in assumptions between the two visions. Everything else flows out like a logical ripple from here. Again, both visions believe human nature is flawed. The constrained vision sees human nature as unchanging, that we can try all we want to make people inherently unselfish or inherently smarter, but that's doomed for failure. This is in stark contrast to the unconstrained vision that sees human nature as capable of continuous improvement. Yes, we start out as being selfish and just smart enough, but we can learn to shed our selfishness and improve our intelligence. Alright, let's let this intellectual rubber meet the road of reality. In reality...
Yeah, so does that make sense so far? Because, like, can you kind of see, like, how those approaches, like, map onto what we see in people's advocacy?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that makes complete sense to me.
Yeah, whereas you know, like the left will want to like change politicians and institute programs to like basically mold society towards the to the betterment, whereas like the more constrained or small government types are basically like, listen, like we need to have like law and order and courts and these things because we need to deal with when people, you know, things go awry, but we can't you know, make people be good, or we can't like you know, push society to be this or that. It just in terms of what we voluntarily create for ourselves in the situations that we put ourselves under. And he talks about in a second constrained like societal institutions versus unconstrained ones, but also in terms of, you know, state versus and you know, anti-state, is that like, you know, if only, you know, like we recognize this, like, listen, no politician is going to make the state work against its nature, which is the nature of the state, right? In turn, it has its own thing as well outside of, you know, human nature. The nature of the state is to propagate itself, to attract people who want to propagate it, and to you know, gather power. It's going to reward those people over the altruistic people who just want to improve society. Like the nature of the state is in a way that enables corruption, and so there is no way to elect the correct people that
right people. Yeah, you can't get the right people into office because ultimately it encourages corruption.
Yeah, exactly. And so
if they weren't corrupt going in, they're certainly gonna be going out.
Yeah, and so that's one thing that kind of stuck in my mind is that, like, yes, this maps onto the nature of this the societal institutions for humans, but also just in terms of what the state is, like not all human nature, but the nature of the state, and understanding how the solutions work between those two quote unquote visions. So it's not strictly the visions that Thomas Sowell was talking about, but it's still the whole idea of this divide of how we approach solutions and what we assume those solutions are going to do is like a pretty good one.
In reality, we all want stuff. Stuff isn't actual stuff, like food, clothes, cars, etc. But also stuff that's harder to define. Things like justice, security, love. Furthermore, these wants, Sowell calls them desires, are unlimited. Once we get some shelter, we want more and better shelters, perhaps even a home. Maybe our own private island one day. Once we get rid of the big injustices, we get angry at the smaller ones. We're selfish after all. The constrained vision recognizes that we have these unlimited desires, but we run into a problem because our human nature is so limited intellectually and morally that we can't get everything we want. Crucially, it also says that we won't tolerate these limitations on our desires, except when there are other powers that force us to. These other powers are called social processes. Social processes serve two primary roles. Firstly, they help to limit the amount of pain that we cause each other. For example, social processes are things like religion, that say we shouldn't steal things from each other or else, or government, that punishes us if we do steal. But social processes not only serve this restricting role, limiting the amount of pain that we cause each other, but also help to elevate us above our base nature and help to advance the human race. For example, prices in a free market economy are a social process that helps coordinate what people want or desire with what entrepreneurs will end up creating. Common languages give us the means to communicate to find solutions to complex problems. The cultural tradition of simple politeness helps everyday interactions be just more pleasant and enjoyable. Even things like moral traditions, cultural habits, aversions, attractions can all be social processes that help elevate us above our base nature. These social processes weren't designed by some philosopher king 2,000 years ago. Rather, they grew out of the experiences, wisdom, and hard lessons learned of people over time. Each generation, in a sense, adds to this body of knowledge by their experiences, and ends up discarding subconsciously or consciously what becomes outdated over time. Sometimes knowledge is passed down explicitly, like in the Ten Commandments. But even when this does happen, says the constrained vision, it's usually just someone writing down what everybody kind of already knows. They're in a sense just codifying what people already practice. So to sum up, the constrained vision has a pretty poor view of humans' ability to change our base nature.
And one thing that I think people underestimate, right, with this sort of way of solving problems is how effective it is, how it ties into decentralization, right? Because that's what we talk about is decentralization, right, and taking away the state. And who could possibly stop people from robbing people except for the police, or that sorts of things, and so you take away the state solutions, and people ask, how will this get done? And it's like, well, we as humans still need to deal with our problems, and we have been doing it for a very fucking long time. And I feel like it's just, if we go back to solving our problems without outsourcing it to the state, it's not like it's just gonna continue out of nowhere. Like, it's not like we're just gonna allow all this shit to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make much sense to me anyway. I mean, it's a fair question because you are proposing radically changing the layout of society. So people want to know, okay, well, what's the alternative? And you tell them, well, the alternative is people start protecting themselves, and they say, well, then you start having these um, conflicts. Somebody kicks in your front door, and you have to shoot them, and all this other stuff. And I'm like, well, first of all, that happens anyway, even with the way things are now. I mean, I don't know how um, how everybody sort of experiences this, but I mean, I live in the middle of fucking nowhere. Somebody kicks in my front door, there's nobody coming. Like, the cops are not going to be here for anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, and by then lots of shit could have happened. um, Best case scenario, they've already robbed me and left. Worst case scenario, I'm dead. um, and then on top of that, it's like, well, I mean, what is a cop? Are they not a person? Why are they somehow elevated beyond this? Again, they say people are selfish and all this. Well, why are they elevated beyond this base nature that everybody else apparently has? And I think based on the evidence, they clearly aren't. I mean, a cop's just a guy with a gun and a badge. They're not different from everybody else really in any way.
Yeah, one of the most important like things that I think that like people need to like consider when doing these like thought experiments or these hypotheticals about what the fuck is going to happen is the word incentives. Who is incentivized to do what, and what do these changes mean for the incentives of the different people in here. So if like we take away state cops, are we just incentivized to let people rob us and to be violent, or are we incentivized to find some other fucking solution that doesn't involve it's not like this shit is just gonna just in the same way. It's the same regard of like the free market in terms of prices for different things, right? What happens when it suddenly gets harder to harvest coffee beans for whatever fucking reason? Well, maybe people drink more tea, or maybe people do this instead of that. And so this is what the market is all about, is how it doesn't say this is the way things need to be organized. It's like, listen, it needs to be organized so that people solve their own problems, right? So if you have a concern about a societal problem, then maybe we decentralize it to the point where the people most affected by it have the most ability to act upon the solution, rather than outsourcing it to a third party that may or may not care about it as much as the people who are genuinely affected by it.
And I mean, oftentimes the solutions are better because they're tailored to the people. Instead of you're not casting a wide net, you're letting individual people solve the problems the way that best suits them. I mean, people are, gonna have different solutions to the same problems depending on their individual needs. So, having a catch-all solution often just doesn't work.
Yeah, and this is going to be contrasted with the way that the state is incentivized to solve issues, which is the state is incentivized to solve issues if there's a financial or political benefit for them to do that.
Right.
And in the case of, let's say, like a issue where there's a change that, let's say, it favors a business because it makes certain imports more difficult, right? Which means that they are more able to sell things at a higher price. Like, let's just, like hypothetically bring this up. So now they have an incentive to lobby politicians who will listen to them, and they have an incentive because there's a clear centralized benefit for them to change this law. And now it'll be a net detriment to the rest of us, right? It'll cost us something because, like, let's say we can't get, we could alternatively get something imported for a cheaper bit, or maybe got it home for cheaper, whatever the case may be. But now that they've changed around the tariff laws so that they get to charge the better price instead, so we lose out. But our actual loss in terms of the higher price that we pay individually isn't really that high. It's not super, super high, not to the point where you and I actually are rational in being at the forefront of opposing it, right? Of educating, because not only do we have to oppose it, we actually have to first be educated about the issue to begin with. And all of us have a certain amount of bandwidth about what is important to fucking care about and to educate ourselves about. Now, if the cost of this new measure is so low, so minuscule that no individual is rational in making it their political like opposition, right, to making it their political cause to oppose that, because individually the cost is just so low to us that it doesn't make sense. So then the measure passes because the beneficiary, right, the person who benefits has a big incentive to push for it and lobby for it, and then the people who it affects negatively, it's dispersed amongst the population of everybody, right? So each individual has no reason to make it their cause to oppose that. And so this is the nature of how political actions get accomplished within government because of these, this lobby structure, is that all the people who make us worse off by giving themselves favoritism within, legislation and this sort of idea, the way that they're able to get away with it is that each individual case is so individually unimportant for, on the small scale for you and I, because it's like a couple of cents here in tax or whatever the fuck. And so we don't bat an eye at it, right? And so it's the same idea with like the dispersed cost when it came to the COVID stimulus checks, right? We knew that we were getting this amount of money back because they told us, right? But we didn't see how much was being siphoned off, not only to other people for other causes, but siphoned away from us in the future in terms of inflation and that sort of deal. And so that's kind of the nefarious nature of centralized solutions to problems, is that these people flock to get the central authority to solve their problems, while also to solve their problems at our expense, knowing that there is a low incentive to oppose them, given how dispersed the costs are. And so yeah, that's why centralization is terrible. Versus the decentralized nature of these institutions.
Essentially, we can't really. And since we have these unlimited desires, social processes, in a sense, make up the difference, helping to advance society and keep us from hurting each other more. Alright, enough of that. Let's see what the unconstrained vision has to say. The unconstrained vision sees things quite simply. Yes, it says, we have unlimited desires, but our human potential is limitless. By shedding our selfish nature and improving ourselves morally, we can freely accept any suffering we ourselves might feel if the outcome means a better society. And by increasing our intellectual power, we can figure out many solutions to our desires. All we need to do is compile all the relevant knowledge together and use our brain power to figure it out. Critically, to the unconstrained vision, knowledge is facts, figures, logical arguments, and anything that can be articulated rationally. Social processes, or the wisdom of the ages, or whatever the constrained vision wants to call it, is not knowledge. The goal is to get everyone to this intellectual and unselfish plane of existence eventually. But it's inevitable that some people are going to arrive here first. And when they do, they view it as their responsibility to use their intellectual abilities and unselfish moral nature to make the best decisions for these other people, the unwashed masses, since they don't understand what is best for them. And until such a time when they also can make the best decisions for themselves, they'll use their morally superior and intellectual superhuman ability to make decisions for them.
Oh, I wonder what woke means. Awakened, right? And this whole idea of specialized knowledge, of being able to mold society to a better mold.
No, that's probably not. No, that's probably I don't. Nah.
Yeah, and gosh, what was it? Marx talked about this too, and the classic socialists, which they had. I think it was called the Marxist Man or the Socialist Man, right? And it was this idea that like, oh, we're so depraved and so, fallible nowadays because of the institutions that put us, because of capitalism that incentivizes us to exploit each other and profit off of each other. And that if only we had these institutions that ensured our equality and our well-being, right, in terms of all of society, inequality, then man doesn't need to have luxuries, like to strive for profit and luxury like he feels to be nowadays. He'll just be satisfied with contributing to society, right, and being non-selfish and being hardworking and this is why they thought communism would work, right? And this is not just like because people nowadays will criticize communism and be like, well, it doesn't work because people don't want to work, or people will always be selfish and people will always not, want some stuff for free and things. But you got to understand is that Marx said, listen, this is how people are nowadays because of capitalism. And the only reason they're like this is because profit rewards the selfish and profit rewards the exploiters. And that if we only had a system that allowed people to rise to their potential, but also rewarded them based off of their needs, all this, so his idea of society would rid man of these flaws in their nature, and a better form of man would rise out of the communist system. And so it's important to understand that this is part of the fucking fantasy, right? Is that this is not just a thing that they overlooked. This is not a thing that they didn't think of. Is that they acknowledged that people will act this way, but they blamed it on capitalism, and they
on capitalism rather than human nature. Yeah,
exactly. And they, and then this again ties back to this idea, this idea that human nature is perfectible and malleable towards the betterment of society based off of the institutions that we erect to mold it that way.
You can see how that one difference earlier about the potential of man is already causing a major split between the two visions. The constrained vision believes it's human nature to have unlimited desires, but that our limited intelligence and selfishness keep us from being able to satisfy them all. So in order to cope with this limited base nature, humans have learned lessons over time from hard-won experience about what to do to best contain our dangerous and selfish impulses, but also constructively channel human energies towards creating ever higher levels of prosperity. These experiences become integrated into social processes like traditions and morals and prices, etc. The constrained vision views this experience as a form of knowledge. Even though it's not facts, figures, or logical arguments, it can be just as useful and even more so sometimes. It shouldn't be surprising, of course, that the unconstrained vision reaches the complete opposite conclusion. Of course our desires are unlimited, it says, but people can improve their intelligence and shed their unselfish nature. So, what we need to do is find the best solutions for society by 1, improving ourselves, and 2, compiling all the relevant facts, figures, and rationally finding a solution. Of course, it's inevitable that some people will reach this higher level of understanding before others, and until everyone is smart enough and morally committed enough to make the right decisions, these intellectual and morally superior pioneers will have to make the best decisions for everybody else. Critically, the unconstrained vision doesn't need social processes or the wisdom of the ages. If things cannot be justified rationally using specifically articulated reasons, then it shouldn't exist. Now it's easy to see how these different visions about men's ability can virtually predict the answer to any number of huge questions. Let's take the most basic of questions. Who should choose? Well, the constrained vision, with its view that no one is really any smarter than anybody else, or that much more moral, says that everybody should be allowed to choose for themselves what is best. They could make their decision based off of their morality or spirituality, or they could just follow the money, or they could just follow tradition. It doesn't really matter how they end up deciding. What is important is that they're all contributing to these social processes which help advance society towards ever higher levels. The unconstrained vision, with its view that human intelligence and moral potential is huge, says that anyone who's strengthened their mind to be an intellectual powerhouse and possesses the requisite moral commitment can effectively and unbiasedly reason out what is best. In reality, not everyone will reach this superior level of human all at once. So the intellectual and moral elite should make the best decisions for everybody else who's either too dumb to understand or not morally committed enough. Amusingly, you can also see how these different visions even affect the insults that different sides throw at each other. People with the constrained vision will often see the other side as truly being sincere about their desire to change the world, but they don't realize that they're being naive, that they're simply too inexperienced to understand that you're going against human nature and that your plan is simply never going to work. People with the unconstrained vision will often counter with accusations that those with the constrained vision are corrupt or dumb or clinging to outmoded ideas, because the only logical reasons for someone to disagree with them are: 1, they're being paid off by somebody, or simply haven't morally committed themselves to finding the best solution; 2, aren't smart enough to see the truth; or 3, don't really realize that social processes aren't wisdom, but simply traditions that have been carried on that have no basis in reason, and if they can't be justified with reason, then they shouldn't exist. Hopefully this brief summary piqued your interest in the book, because this is really just the tip of the vision iceberg. I've only skimmed the surface of what Thomas Sowell goes over in this book. In addition, he goes into much greater detail on both visions, and even explains how words that we typically think only mean one thing, like freedom or justice, mean completely different things to both of the visions. So, if you like this summary, please go purchase the book from Amazon.
Yeah, okay. So anyways, that's, just of a conflict of visions, and like you can already tell like how that's a great way of basically laying out and understanding why people think that they're so right when it comes to, proposing these solutions, and why, like, where they come from,
right,
with that kind of security. And even when he talks about like the insults, right? I mean, that's a pretty big stereotype about how, the right thinks that the left is naive, and the left thinks that the right is evil.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so, there's a reason for that. There's a source, right, of that, and it has to do with the nature of what they think, the solution should be like, and everything. And so yeah, that was a kind of a great thing that, like, you can keep in mind, like, this was written, I forgot when this was fucking written, but I mean, I first heard about it in like 2007, right? And so it was written well before that, and not necessarily about any one particular issue, yet it continues to be proved right that these things just fucking fall down the line with exactly how he categorized them and laid them out, despite not necessarily focusing on any issue in particular, or calling it out. It just happens to fucking just map out no matter what issue there happens to be. And so yeah, it's a good like lesson to keep in mind and to consider when you like look at like these fanatical people and see, well, what the fuck are they even, like, how can they think they're in the right here? And,
because it's easy enough to criticize somebody's conclusions on how something should be done, but it's also really important to kind of see, like, how did they come to that conclusion? Like, what's the thought process behind why? Because I mean, there's plenty of conclusions that people come to, solutions for problems that I think are just batshit insane, but it's there is like a sort of logic behind it, and I think it's it's important that if you're going to if you are going to take the time to argue against it, it's good to know kind of where they're coming from.
Yeah. And again, that last lesson on the words that they use, right, like, and what they mean, because I mean, you remember when the pandemic was first coming about and the restrictions were happening, and then you got these people who were like mockingly, like sarcastically going, oh my god, these conservatives, and they're concerned about freedom and rights. Oh my god. And it's like, just listen, freedom and rights is like a really, really important thing. Like, our ownership over ourselves is fundamental to the topic of, you know, I don't know, slavery. Like, hello,
it's vitally important.
And so but the thing is for them, it has such a polluted sort of meaning that they can literally laugh at concerns about human rights, about individual, because they think that like the consequences or the ramifications or the inconvenience, right, is so minor that there's no principle to be defended here. It's just, you know, pedantic, right? But it's not pedantic. It's very, very fucking important. And in the same regard, when they have shit fits over things like profit or exploitation, right? These words mean a certain thing in their context, especially when a Marxist is saying them, because they mean very specific things when it comes to capitalist exploitation and profit. That it comes from, you know, obviously Marx and the labor theory of value, but they're pushing in a whole framework with those words, right? And so it's important to know. Actually, one guy that I want us to look at in future episodes too is Richard Wolff. Have you ever heard of that guy?
I've heard the name. The name's familiar.
Yeah, and so he is as stupid as the term is, a Marxist economist.
Okay, that's probably why I've heard it then, yeah.
And he has done speeches where he criticizes capitalism and all this sorts of I mean, and he speaks very strongly and emotionally about, you know, and you're just like, shut the fuck up, Jesus. Because he's I mean, I am, at least, because it's amazing to me that this guy gets the attention he does, because he's got like a fucking PhD in the subject and he makes it his life to be an academic about economics. And I am a cook without a college education, and I happen to read more books than the average guy who's, you know, interested in politics, I guess. But I wouldn't consider myself, I consider myself like generally well-rounded in terms of the basic, you know, knowledge that I have about economics and history. But I'm no specialist, right? This is not my job. My job is to fucking go to work, clock in, and cook some food, and that's it. But this is this guy's job to be. But yet, like, I can left right, like, see like mistakes in this sort of shit, and like coming from like knowing, you know, where he's coming from in a Marxist perspective too. It's not like just like oh, you know, I'm anti-Marxist, he's Marxist, therefore everything he says, you know, I just have a right-wing talking point to address. It's like no, I understand the exact point that he's trying to make, and also the fucking holes. And it's just like, how, like, you almost gaslight your own self sometimes, because you're just like, well, I'm surely not like a genius, I'm not fucking like smart, I'm just a fucking guy who read some books. And so how is it that this guy who makes it his job to be an economist about Marxism is making all these fucking mistakes? And it's just like, I'm sure even you, as a person who doesn't consider yourself very well read on economics or these kinds of, you know, on anarchism, like academically, any of that kind of shit, you could still get a load of this fucking guy and be like, there's something fucking rotten about all this shit that he's talking about. This is not, no person who's thought about things for more than 20 seconds can surely believe any of this shit, but he does, because it's his fucking job. And
unless you're like fully already invested in the, you know, in the ideology.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, you don't want to think, like, I don't want to think of myself as especially like immune to propaganda, right? Or especially fucking like rational when it comes to receiving like information. I just take it as I see it. But like, how is it that this fucking guy who surely has been exposed to the criticisms of his ideas before, like, yeah, it's sort of amazing to me that when you realize that these are just real fucking people who live decades of their lives, right? They, like, just like you and I have like 3 decades under our belt, and there's a lot of shit that happened to us. Like Richard Wolff has probably got 5 or 6, you know, he's probably 50 or 60 or some shit. It's like, how does a person live that long and still just, you know, like it's, and again, you don't want to be like, well, I'm just especially smart. At 30 years, I just found all the solutions. It's like, well, that's surely
also probably easier for your average academic, because I mean, academia has a real problem with having an echo chamber.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
it's very rewarding to fall into that line for sure.
it's extremely rewarding, and I mean, you see it all the time with all kinds of different things in academia, but I mean, especially um, stuff like that. I mean, he just doesn't venture out of his bubble.
Yeah.
Whereas someone like you and I probably venture outside of our bubble on a daily basis. I mean, we're considered extremists. Most people do not hold the views that we have. I mean, that's okay. Um,
And
I'm not saying
and
that
it's
they
and it's not like we spent the whole time patting each other on the back and reinforcing our opinions. Like, nah, we've had a lot of arguments with people about when they question that kind of. That's just why like some people were like, why do you long post, or why were you such a long poster for so many fucking years? And it's like, listen, man, I wanted to see what the fuck they had to say about it. Like I said, surely if I'm so wrong and so crazy and so extreme and so racist or whatever, like then you got to have some good shit for me, right? Like, come on, let's go.
Convince me.
Yeah. And yeah, and partially was just like, listen, if I hear this shit often enough, like I can think of things to respond and sharpen my own shit, because these are real fucking people with opinions, and as ass backwards and as like nonsensical as they are, they're gonna pull. Hey, have you ever been in one of those long post arguments where then suddenly this person starts saying shit that, like, listen, like I thought of a lot of things that my opponents could say, and I never thought of that shit, whatever the fuck you just said. And I'm just sort of amazed now. And now I actually have to genuinely, like, I know you're wrong, but I didn't think this person could be this wrong. So I got to reconsider how exactly.
You got to like pause and kind of figure out how you're going to respond.
Like, how did you get here? Like, I didn't. Yeah, exactly. It's like you can predict where your opponents are going to go sometimes, and then sometimes they go to somewhere else, and you're just like, wait a second, I got to even figure out how we got to this point. So, it helps with knowing that there are people out there who believe certain things and that you actually need to think about them and address them, and it's not going to make everybody in the room smarter necessarily, but
no.
But at least we're constantly exposed. I mean, this is Tumblr is not a anarcho-capitalist, right-wing, pro freedom friendly place. Where we have like list after list of Nazi block lists just because we happen to hate the state.
People, the links to people go to make those sometimes make me laugh. I mean, 2/3 of the people on them are usually like just conservatives, just like your average basic, not even really extreme conservatives. A lot of them are not white, so calling them white supremacists and Nazis is always really funny. And then there's always a bunch of anarchists on there, and I'm like, how? I don't understand it. I don't understand how people equate that with fascism. I mean, I can, I guess I could see how you get there, maybe, if you kind of start equating it to like corporate feudalism, because you no longer have the government to control corporations, so now the corporations kind of fill the power vacuum, yada yada yada, and eventually you get around to that or something. But it's like it doesn't make a person fascist, because I mean it's kind of goofy to call somebody who's very anti-state fascist. It just doesn't make any sense.
No, and of course this because they don't want to acknowledge that fascism comes from socialism, and because that would be an indictment to the group think to what was it collectivism and that sort of ideas. So they don't want to. They completely just divorce the term from anything that any actual meaning that it had historically or politically, and it just becomes another cudgel that they swing around.
It's bizarre because every once in a while you'll get. I mean, there are authoritarian right wing bloggers on Tumblr. They're around. I've met and talked to them, but it's actually a very small minority. It's a very small minority. It's a lot less than people try to make it out to be. I mean, if 2/3 of your block list just don't include people that are even really right wing, you've probably got a problem. And there just aren't neo-Nazis hiding under the fucking rocks everywhere. They might get 2 or 3 that are, and a lot of them are very open about it. They don't, they're not trying to hide it or anything. They are very openly nationalist or white supremacist. It's not like they try to hide it. So
some are just like straight up like, listen, National Socialism, I love that shit, like, and I had people even when I was pointing out that I had a post about the Nazis in Ukraine, and a lot of it was the meme that was like, never ask a man his salary or a woman her age, or the Ukrainian soldier what that little symbol means on there or that little patch means, and there were dudes in there going, yeah, they're super based, I love them, sun wheel, yoo-hoo, and it's just like, yeah, some of those guys are out there. But no, did you remember the block list from just this past week? I think it was, where it was the screenshot of some dude's follow lists who I guess likes a lot of these, like anarcho and right winger blogs, and
it's actually somebody that follow. I think they probably follow you also, but I know that for a fact they follow my blog usually whenever it pops up because they've liked a few of my posts. And I said, oh hey. And yeah, I mean,
definitely a lot of my mutuals, but the screenshot, because it had the Shinigami eyes, like red box outline. Did you see that particular one?
Oh yeah, I saw that one, and I saw the follow up where it was like it wasn't even real.
No, yeah, I know, because I downloaded the Shinigami's eyes app or add-on myself. And I looked at it, I was like, none of these fucking blogs are actually highlighted by Shinigami eyes at all. This was literally Photoshop or some shit. And then the dude blocked me. He went like, oh dang, that's crazy. Like he wanted to play it off like he was just mocking me for like even like looking into it. But it's like, listen, man, you made that shit up. Like,
and I suspected something weird was going on because my blog hadn't even been around. Like my new one hadn't really been around that long.
Mm-hmm.
And it already had a thing on there, and I'm like, well, I can't see why I would have already been flagged, because I think at most I'd been around again for maybe 3 weeks tops.
Yeah, no, I looked at my whole list, and I think the only people Snowflake was one of the people that's still highlighted by that add-on actually. And
yeah, I mean, he's been around for a long time.
And also Sir You're Being Mocked.
Yeah,
but again, his blog's been around forever, so of course both of them are highlighted. And then there was like, I think maybe like 2 or 3 other people from my follow list that
but even then it was like, yeah, the whole thing was highlighted, but like their thing was like, all these people are Nazis, and I'm like, that's kind of a weird jump to make. Like, okay, you're saying like they're clearly all transphobic because they're marked, but that means that they're Nazis, and I'm like, what?
And yeah, it wasn't even real. The whole thing was fucking made up. And yeah, I got blocked because of it from that guy. Which
they block basically anybody that was even mildly critical or posted anything on there that wasn't within their like little inner circle automatically got blocked.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I came up with for this week. What we had going on. And yeah, I'm gonna continue, I guess, gathering things and seeing what the hell else we can look at, like in terms of.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna run out of stuff. Seems like every week there's some new shit.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we'll keep on doing with like some of the ideas that we have, where we can just look at like in general, like the whole, all of those arguments, like the different sides and what they bring to the table, but also mix it in with like current events and shit too, because yeah, the fucking gas prices alone, that thing is gonna continue for God knows fucking how long. And yeah, I'm gonna be switching to walking and biking a lot more often when I can.
Yeah, I don't see that stopping anytime soon. And I mean, it's one of the more concerning things for sure. Not just in terms of like on its face things are more expensive, but what that ends up leading to, especially when people start getting desperate. It's not good.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we'll stay on the lookout, gather a bunch of shit, come back next week and see what else we have to talk about.
All right, sounds good, man.
All right, I'm gonna say goodbye to everybody. We're ending the stream, and we'll be